The first thing you need to know about my wife Taryn is that she lies like most people breathe, naturally, constantly, and without thinking about it. The second thing is that I'm probably the only person in our mid-sized Midwest city who still finds her lies amusing rather than infuriating. At least I was until last Tuesday. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Nolan Briggs, and I teach chemistry to hormone-addled teenagers at Lincoln High School. At 40, I've perfected the art of sarcasm to a degree that would make Oscar Wilde weep with envy. It's a survival skill when you're surrounded by kids who think sodium chloride is a new energy drink and adults who peaked in high school. Another dinner with the girls? I asked, watching Taryn apply lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. She was getting dressed for what had to be her 5th girls' night this month, and it was only the 15th. Jenna's going through a rough patch with her divorce, she said, not meeting my eyes in the mirror. We're being supportive friends. Supportive friends? Oh, right. The same Jenna who once told me at a barbecue that marriage was just a legal contract for people too scared to live authentically. The same Corey who posted Instagram stories about how settling is the end of dreams while her husband worked double shifts to pay for her yoga retreats. Which restaurant tonight? I asked, stirring my coffee with deliberate casualness. Oh, that new place downtown, the one with the glass walls. She waved her hand vaguely. Bistro something. Bistro something. How delightfully specific. The thing about teaching chemistry is that you develop a keen eye for reactions. Mix certain elements together, and you get predictable results. Add heat, pressure, or the right catalyst, and even stable compounds can explode. Taryn had been exhibiting all the signs of an unstable reaction for months. Secretive phone calls, sudden interest in her appearance, and a mysterious glow that definitely wasn't coming from our 15-year-old marriage. At school, Coach Baines found me grading papers in my classroom during lunch break. Dave Baines was one of those rare gym teachers who actually had a brain, probably because he'd been a decent college football player before a knee injury redirected him toward education. You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes, he said, dropping into a student desk that creaked ominously under his 200-pound frame. Just contemplating the mysteries of the universe, I replied, like how my wife manages to have dinner with the same 2 friends 3 times a week, yet somehow never has any interesting stories to tell me about these gatherings. Dave raised an eyebrow. The Bermuda Triangle of group texts? Exactly. Information goes in, nothing comes out. Dave said carefully, my wife mentioned seeing Taryn at Rossini's last week. Said she was with some guy she didn't recognize. Tall, athletic-looking dude. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Rossini's? That's not exactly a girls' night kind of place. That's what Linda thought, too. She said Taryn looked cozy with the guy. Real cozy. Rossini's was the kind of upscale Italian place where entrees started at $30 and the wine list required a second mortgage. It was also where Taryn and I had our first anniversary dinner, back when we still pretended to enjoy each other's company. That afternoon, I did what any suspicious husband in the digital age would do. I became a detective. Taryn's laptop was password protected, but she'd never been particularly creative. Her password was still Princess 2019, the year she'd gotten her promotion at the insurance company. Her Facebook messages were a goldmine of deception. A group chat with Jenna Morrison and Corey Walsh revealed months of planning, lies, and what appeared to be a coordinated effort to cover for each other's extracurricular activities. Jenna, Tom's working late again tonight. Perfect timing for Rossini's. Corey, Dave's taking the kids to his mother's this weekend. Finally some adult time. Taryn, Nolan bought the girls' night story again. Sometimes I think he's actually getting dumber with age. Jenna, LOL. At least your husband isn't asking questions. Tom wanted to know why I needed a new dress for book club. Corey, speaking of which, Felix says he can get us that group rate at the Marriott downtown if we want to make it a weekend thing. Felix, so our mystery man had a name. I scrolled further back, my coffee growing cold as I discovered months of messages about the Felix situation. Felix Danner, as it turned out, was a local contractor who specialized in high-end home renovations and, apparently, married women. The messages painted a picture of a man who treated adultery like a hobby and had somehow convinced 3 supposedly intelligent women that they were all special. The most damning evidence came in the form of photos. Taryn had sent dozens of pictures to the group chat, herself in lingerie I'd never seen, provocative poses in what looked like a hotel room, and several shots of her with a tall, dark-haired man who radiated the kind of cocky confidence that made my teeth itch. But it was the messages about me that really stung. Taryn, Nolan's so predictable. comes home, grades papers, makes his little sarcastic comments, and goes to bed by 10. It's like being married to a particularly boring sitcom character. Jenna. At least he's stable. Felix is exciting, but he's not exactly husband material. Taryn. That's the beauty of it. I get security with Nolan and excitement with Felix. Best of both worlds. Corey. You're living the dream, girl. I just wish Dave wasn't so suspicious. He actually asked to see my book club reading list last week. Taryn. The key is making them feel like they're the smart ones. Let Nolan think his little jokes and observations make him superior. Meanwhile, I'm getting the best years of my life with a real man. A real man. 20 years of marriage, and I'd been demoted to a placeholder. I spent the rest of the afternoon planning. By the time Taryn got home from work, I had a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. Another girls' night tonight? I asked as she headed upstairs to change. You know it. Jenna's still struggling with the divorce proceedings. Which restaurant did you say? Bistro, Nouveau, downtown. I nodded thoughtfully. Sounds fancy. You should wear that blue dress, the one that makes your eyes pop. She paused on the stairs, surprised by the compliment. Really? Absolutely. Your friends deserve to see you at your best. An hour later, she was gone, and I was in my car heading downtown. The beauty of living in a mid-sized city is that there are only so many upscale restaurants, and most of them are clustered in the same area. It didn't take long to spot Taryn's silver Honda in the parking lot of Rossini's. I parked across the street and waited. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see 4 figures at a corner table. Taryn, Jenna, Corey, and a man who had to be Felix. Even from a distance, I could see why women found him attractive. He had that easy confidence that comes from never being told no, the kind of swagger that suggested he'd been the star quarterback who'd never quite gotten over his glory days. I pulled out my phone and started recording. They were laughing about something, Felix's hand resting casually on Taryn's thigh. Jenna and Corey flanked them like wingmen, creating a perfect tableau of betrayal. I watched my wife of 15 years lean into another man's touch, saw her throw back her head and laugh at something he whispered in her ear. That's when I sent the text. Turn around. The reaction was immediate and beautiful. Taryn's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it casually, then froze. Her face went white as she looked up and scanned the restaurant windows. Jenna and Corey followed her gaze, their expressions shifting from confusion to panic as they spotted me across the street. Felix, oblivious to the sudden tension, continued talking until Taryn grabbed his arm. I watched him turn toward the window, his cocky smile fading as he realized they had an audience. I kept recording as chaos erupted at their table. Taryn was frantically typing on her phone, probably some explanation about coincidences and misunderstandings. Jenna and Corey looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Felix, to his credit, seemed more annoyed than panicked, the reaction of a man who'd been caught before and talked his way out of it. My phone buzzed with Taryn's response. It's not what it looks like. Felix is Jenna's cousin. We're helping her through the divorce. I laughed out loud in my car. Jenna's cousin. The woman who'd been sending topless photos to the group chat about her affair with Felix was now claiming he was family. The creativity was almost admirable. I typed back, "Come outside, all of you, now." Through the window, I watched Taryn show my message to the others. Felix shook his head, clearly advising them to ignore me, but Taryn knew me well enough to recognize when I wasn't bluffing. 5 minutes later, they emerged from the restaurant like guilty teenagers caught sneaking out. Taryn approached my car first, her face a mask of false confidence. "Nolan, I can explain." "Get in," I said, unlocking the passenger door. "I'm not leaving my friends." "They're not your friends, Taryn. Friends don't help you destroy your marriage. Get in the car, or I'll have this conversation right here in the parking lot where everyone can hear it." She got in. Through the windshield, I could see Felix, Jenna, and Corey huddled together, probably strategizing their next move. Felix kept glancing at my car with the kind of territorial aggression that suggested he wasn't used to sharing his toys. "How long?" I asked. "Nolan, please. How long have you been screwing Felix?" She flinched at my bluntness. In 15 years of marriage, I'd never been crude with her, never raised my voice or made her feel small. Even my sarcasm had always been gentle, more self-deprecating than cutting. 6 months, she whispered. "And Jenna and Corey? Are they screwing him too? Or are they just enjoying the vicarious thrill of helping you cheat?" "It's not like that. Felix isn't... We're not exclusive. He's helping all of us remember what it feels like to be desired." "What it feels like to be desired." I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting the bitter irony. "And what does that make me? The placeholder? The stable, boring husband who pays the bills while you rediscover your nature with a contractor who probably has a different married woman for every day of the week? Tears started flowing down her cheeks. The same tears that had gotten her out of trouble since high school, probably. But I was done being manipulated by her waterworks. "I want you out of the house," I said quietly. "Nolan, please. We can work through this. It's just a phase." "No, it's not. This isn't a midlife crisis or a moment of weakness. This is 6 months of planning, lying, and laughing about what a pathetic fool your husband is. You made your choice, Taryn. Now live with it." I started the car. "You have until Sunday to get your things. After that, anything left in the house becomes kindling for my next barbecue." She got out of the car without another word. I watched her walk back to her co-conspirators, saw Felix put a protective arm around her shoulders. The gesture was probably meant to be comforting, but it looked more possessive than caring. As I drove home, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a hot emotion, and what I felt was cold, calculating, and infinitely more dangerous. Taryn thought she knew me, the predictable chemistry teacher who made sarcastic observations and went to bed early. But she'd forgotten something important about chemistry. Even the most stable compounds can become explosive under the right conditions, and I was about to provide those conditions. Saturday morning brought rain and the kind of gray sky that matched my mood perfectly. Taryn had spent the night at Jenna's house, or so she claimed in the text she'd sent at midnight. More likely, she'd spent it with Felix, crying about her mean husband who'd ruined their romantic evening. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Applegate from next door, holding a casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone who'd been eager to deliver juicy gossip. "Morning, Nolan," she said when I opened the door. "I brought you some tuna casserole. Figured you might need a home-cooked meal." Margaret Applegate was 73 years old and had lived next door for the past decade. She was also the neighborhood's unofficial information clearinghouse, with a network of contacts that would make the CIA jealous. "That's very thoughtful, Mrs. Applegate, but I'm doing fine." "Of course you are, dear. Though I did notice Taryn's car wasn't in the driveway last night. I hope everything's all right." She was fishing, but I wasn't ready to give her the satisfaction of confirmation. Not yet. "Just a girls' night that ran late," I said. "You know how it is." Her eyes gleamed with disappointment at my non-answer, but she pressed on. "Well, if you need anything at all, you just holler. We neighbors have to stick together." After she left, I spent the morning doing something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage, going through Taryn's personal belongings. Her home office yielded a treasure trove of evidence. Hotel receipts charged to our joint credit card, printed emails with Felix discussing their arrangement, and a journal where she documented her affair in excruciating detail. The journal entries were particularly illuminating. March 15th. Felix says I'm different from his other women, more sophisticated. He loves how I can hold an intelligent conversation, unlike the bimbos he usually attracts. Nolan never makes me feel this special. April 2nd. Jenna thinks I should leave Nolan, but that's not realistic. Felix isn't looking for a wife, he's looking for excitement, and honestly, I'm not sure I'd want to be married to someone like him. But the way he makes me feel, it's like being 25 again. May 20th. Had to lie to Nolan about the charges on our credit card. Told him it was a work conference in Chicago. He didn't even question it. Sometimes I think he's willfully blind to what's happening. Maybe he doesn't care enough to fight for our marriage. June 8th. Felix suggested we take a weekend trip to the lake house his friend owns. Just the four of us, him, me, Jenna, and Corey. It would be like a double date, except Jenna and Corey would have to share him. The idea is so deliciously scandalous I can barely stand it. The entries painted a picture of a woman who'd convinced herself that her husband's trust was actually indifference, that his stability was boring, and that being part of a contractor's harem was somehow empowering. By noon, I had enough evidence to bury all four of them in the court of public opinion. The question was how to deploy it for maximum impact. My phone rang. Taryn. We need to talk," she said without preamble. "I thought we covered everything last night." "Felix wants to meet you, man to man." I almost laughed. "Felix wants to meet me. How generous of him." "He thinks there might be a way to work this out, a mature adult solution." "Let me guess. He's going to explain how he's actually doing me a favor by keeping my wife satisfied while I handle the boring domestic stuff." "Don't be crude, Nolan. Felix is a good man. He cares about me." "Felix is a predator who specializes in bored housewives, and you're just another conquest in his collection." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was tight with anger. "You don't know anything about him?" or about what I need. I know he's got at least 3 other married women on rotation. I know he's been using the same lines on all of you. And I know that you're too wrapped up in your midlife fantasy to see how pathetic this whole situation is. Meet us at Rossini's at 7 tonight, she said. If you have any respect left for our marriage, you'll hear what Felix has to say. She hung up before I could respond. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to sit down with her lover and negotiate the terms of my own humiliation. It was the kind of scenario that would have been laughable if it weren't happening to me. But as I sat there staring at my phone, an idea began to form. If they wanted a meeting, I'd give them a meeting they'd never forget. I spent the afternoon preparing. First, I made copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. The journal entries, the credit card statements, the Facebook messages, the photos. Everything went into manila envelopes, one for each participant in tonight's drama. Then I called Dave Baines. "I need a favor," I said when he answered. "Shoot." "Can you meet me at Rossini's tonight around 7:30? Bring Linda if she's free." "Hot date with the missus?" "Something like that. I'll explain when I see you." Next, I called my brother Mike in Denver. We hadn't talked in months, but family is family. "Nolan, everything okay? I need you to do something for me. Tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, I'm going to send you a video. I want you to share it with Mom, Dad, Aunt Susan, and anyone else in the family who might be interested in Taryn's recent activities." "Jesus, what's going on?" "Let's just say your sister-in-law has been exploring new hobbies." By 6:30, I was dressed in my best suit and sitting in my car outside Rossini's. Through the windows, I could see Taryn, Felix, Jenna, and Corey at the same corner table they'd occupied the night before. They looked like they were having a strategy session, probably planning how to handle the confrontation with the cuckolded husband. Felix was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of artificially whitened smile that suggested vanity and insecurity in equal measure. He wore his confidence like an expensive cologne, applied too heavily and designed to mask something unpleasant underneath. At exactly 7 o'clock, I walked into the restaurant. The hostess started to seat me, but I waved her off. "I'm meeting friends." I approached their table with the manila envelopes tucked under my arm. The conversation faded as they noticed me coming. "Nolan," Taryn said, half rising from her chair, "thank you for coming." "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Felix stood and extended his hand. "Felix Danner, I've heard a lot about you." I ignored his outstretched hand and set the envelopes on the table instead. "One for each of you. Consider it required reading." Taryn picked up her envelope with trembling fingers. "What is this?" "Open it and find out." She pulled out the contents, copies of her journal entries, screenshots of the Facebook messages, and several of the more explicit photos she'd shared with the group. Her face went white. Jenna and Corey opened their envelopes to find similar compilations of evidence, including some particularly damning messages about their own marriages and their shared enthusiasm for Felix's attention. Felix's envelope contained something special, a detailed breakdown of his pattern of behavior, including the names and photos of at least 6 other married women he'd been involved with over the past 2 years. I'd spent the morning tracking them down through social media, and several had been surprisingly willing to share their experiences once they realized they weren't his only special lady. "Where did you get all this?" Taryn whispered. "Does it matter? The question is what I'm going to do with it." Felix finally found his voice. "Look, Nolan, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You've been screwing my wife for 6 months while she lied to me about girls' nights and book clubs. Her friends have been helping her cover it up, and you've been treating all 3 of them like your personal harem. Did I miss anything?" The restaurant was starting to notice our table. Conversations at nearby tables had quieted, and I could feel eyes turning in our direction. "Keep your voice down," Felix said, glancing around nervously. "Why? Embarrassed to have people know what kind of man you are?" I pulled out my phone and started recording. For the record, this is Felix Danner, local contractor and part-time homewrecker. "Felix, would you like to explain to my family and friends how you convinced my wife that adultery was a form of self-empowerment?" "Put the phone away," he said, his face flushing red. "Or what? You'll threaten me? In front of all these witnesses?" Taryn was crying now, but they weren't the manipulative tears from the night before. These were tears of genuine panic. "Nolan, please, we can work this out privately." "Privately? Like the way you've been working on your marriage privately for the past 6 months?" I turned the camera on her. "Taryn, would you like to explain to your mother why you've been charging hotel rooms to our joint credit card? Or should I let her read your journal entries about how boring and predictable your husband is?" "You can't do this," Jenna said, speaking for the first time. "This is harassment. No, harassment is what you 3 have been doing to your husbands. This is consequences." I focused the camera on her. Jenna Morrison, married to Tom Morrison for 12 years, mother of 2. Tell me, Jenna, does Tom know that you've been helping my wife cheat while he works overtime to pay for your lifestyle? She covered her face with her hands. Corey tried to get up from the table, but I stepped into her path. Corey Walsh, married to Dave Walsh, stepmother to his 3 children. Corey, how do you think Dave's going to feel when he finds out you've been part of a cheating ring? Think he'll still trust you with his kids? You're destroying our lives, she whispered. No, you destroyed your own lives. I'm just documenting the wreckage. Felix stood up abruptly, knocking over his water glass. That's enough. Turn off the camera. Make me. He took a step toward me, and I smiled. Please, Felix, put your hands on me. Give me a reason to have you arrested for assault. I'm sure your other girlfriends would love to see you on the evening news. He stopped, realizing the trap. Any physical confrontation would only make things worse for him. You want to know what's really pathetic? I said, still recording. It's not that my wife cheated. It's that she cheated with someone so ordinary. Felix, you're not special. You're not irresistible. You're just a middle-aged contractor with a good sales pitch and no conscience. In 10 years, you'll be alone, broke, and wondering why none of your conquests stuck around when you needed them. I turned back to Taryn. And you? You threw away 15 years of marriage for what? A few months of feeling desired by a man who's probably forgotten your name half the time? You could have talked to me. You could have asked for counseling, for changes, for anything. Instead, you chose to lie, cheat, and laugh about it with your friends. The entire restaurant was watching now. Even the servers had stopped pretending to work. I'm filing for divorce on Monday, I announced. The evidence in those envelopes will ensure that Taryn gets exactly what she deserves. Nothing. As for you, Felix, I hope the other husbands are as understanding as I am when they find out what you've been doing. I stopped recording and put my phone away. Enjoy your dinner. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Felix say, We should call the police. I turned back. Go ahead. I'd love to explain to the officers why you think it's illegal for a husband to confront his wife's lover with evidence of their affair. Outside, Dave and Linda Baines were just arriving. How'd it go? Dave asked. Better than expected. Want to grab a drink somewhere else? I have a feeling Rossini's is about to get very uncomfortable. As we walked to Dave's car, I looked back through the restaurant windows. Felix was leaning over the table, apparently trying to calm the 3 women, but I could see the cracks forming. Jenna was shaking her head, probably realizing that her marriage was over. Corey was on her phone, maybe trying to reach her husband before he heard it from someone else. And Taryn was staring at the evidence spread across the table, finally understanding that her fantasy was about to become a very public nightmare. The best part? I was just getting started. Sunday morning brought the first real sunshine we'd seen in weeks, which felt like cosmic approval for what I was about to do. Taryn had sent a series of increasingly desperate texts throughout the night, ranging from anger to bargaining to outright begging. I'd ignored them all. At 9 a.m. sharp, she pulled into our driveway with a U-Haul trailer attached to her Honda. Felix was with her, playing the role of supportive boyfriend, though I noticed he stayed in the passenger seat while she approached the front door. I opened it before she could knock. 2 hours, I said. Take what you need and leave the rest. Nolan, we need to talk about last night. We talked last night. You had 6 months to talk. Now you have 2 hours to pack. She looked older in the morning light, the stress of the previous evening etched in the lines around her eyes. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, but I'd suggest figuring it out quickly because in about 4 hours, half the city is going to know exactly what kind of person you are. Her face went pale. What do you mean? I held up my phone, showing her the video I'd recorded at the restaurant. This goes live on Facebook at 1 o'clock. I've already sent copies to your boss, your mother, and about 50 of our mutual friends. Oh, and I took the liberty of creating a little documentary using your journal entries and those photos you shared with the girls. Very artistic. You can't do this. It's revenge porn. Actually, it's not. I never appear in any of your photos, and I'm not sharing anything that wasn't willingly given to multiple people. Your lawyer can explain the difference when you hire one. Felix finally got out of the car and approached the house. In daylight, he looked less impressive. Older, with the kind of artificial tan that spoke of insecurity and too much time at the gym. We need to discuss this like adults, he said. Adults don't sleep with other people's wives. Adults don't lie for 6 months straight. Adults don't humiliate their spouses for entertainment. Look, I understand you're upset. Upset? I laughed. Felix, I'm not upset. Upset is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. What I am is methodical. See, you made one crucial mistake. You assumed I was the same boring, predictable guy my wife complained about. but boring people can be very dangerous when you push them too far. I pulled out a manila envelope, a new one, prepared specifically for him. This contains the contact information for every woman you've been involved with over the past 3 years. I spent yesterday afternoon having very enlightening conversations with them. Turns out you have a pattern, Felix. The same lines, the same promises, the same disappearing act when things get complicated. His confidence faltered. You had no right. I had every right. You involved yourself in my marriage, so I involved myself in your business. Speaking of which, how do you think your clients will react when they find out their trusted contractor has been using job sites to seduce their wives? Because that's exactly what happened with the Hendersons last year, isn't it? Felix's face went white. The Henderson job had been a big one, a complete kitchen renovation that had taken 3 months and netted him nearly $40,000. It had also netted him an affair with Mrs. Henderson that had ended when her husband found out and threatened to ruin Felix's business. I also took the liberty of calling your ex-wife, I continued. Diane was very interested to learn about your current activities, especially since you're behind on your alimony payments, but somehow have money for expensive dinners and hotel rooms. You snake, he snarled. There it is, the real Felix Danner, not the smooth-talking charmer, just another angry middle-aged man who can't handle the consequences of his actions. Taryn was crying again, but I was beyond caring. Get your things and get out, both of you. They spent the next 2 hours loading boxes into the U-Haul while I sat on my front porch, drinking coffee and grading papers. Mrs. Applegate made several trips to her mailbox, clearly hoping for gossip, but I wasn't ready to give her the full story yet. At exactly 1 o'clock, I posted the video. The response was immediate and devastating. Within minutes, comments started pouring in from friends, family, and coworkers. Taryn's phone must have exploded with notifications because I could hear it buzzing constantly from inside the house. My brother Mike called from Denver. Holy shit, Nolan. I knew you said she was cheating, but that video... Jesus. How's the family taking it? Mom's furious. She never liked Taryn, but she's talking about driving out there to give her a piece of her mind. Dad just keeps shaking his head and muttering about kids these days, even though you're both 40. And Aunt Susan? She shared it with her church group. Apparently Taryn's about to become a cautionary tale for the ladies' auxiliary. By evening, the video had been shared over 200 times. The comments ranged from supportive to savage, with several people sharing their own stories of infidelity and betrayal. A few criticized me for airing my dirty laundry in public, but they were vastly outnumbered by those who applauded my approach. More importantly, the professional consequences were already beginning. Taryn's boss at the insurance company called me directly. Apparently, several major clients had seen the video and were questioning whether they wanted someone with such questionable judgment handling their claims. I'm not saying we're firing her, he said carefully, but we may need to reassign her to a less client-facing role. Felix's consequences came even faster. By Monday morning, 3 clients had canceled their contracts, and his ex-wife had filed a motion to garnish his wages for unpaid alimony. His business partner, a straight-laced family man named Gary Peterson, called to inform me that they were dissolving their partnership. I can't have this kind of scandal associated with our company, Gary explained. We do a lot of work for families, and trust is everything in this business. But the real masterpiece came Tuesday morning when I arrived at school to find Principal Halverson waiting in my classroom. Nolan, we need to talk. Janet Halverson was a fair but no-nonsense administrator who'd been running Lincoln High for 8 years. She was also a deeply religious woman who took a dim view of adultery and moral relativism. I saw your video, she said without preamble. I figured you might. Several parents have called to express their support for you. Apparently word has gotten around about your situation. I waited for the other shoe to drop. I also had an interesting conversation with Diane Danner yesterday, Felix's ex-wife. She wanted to thank you for providing evidence that her lawyer can use in their alimony case. Happy to help. She also mentioned something interesting. Apparently Felix has been doing some work for the Morrison family. Jenna Morrison's husband Tom hired him to renovate their basement 3 months ago. The implications hit me immediately. Felix hadn't just been sleeping with Jenna. He'd been doing it in her own home, probably while her husband was at work and her kids were at school. Tom doesn't know yet, Janet continued, but Diane thought you might want to give him a heads up. Professional courtesy, one betrayed husband to another. That afternoon, I found myself sitting in Tom Morrison's living room, watching a good man's world collapse in real time. Tom was a decent guy, an accountant who coached Little League on weekends and had never said a bad word about anyone. I hired him because Jenna recommended him, Tom said, staring at the evidence I'd brought. She said he was reliable, professional. I never suspected. How could you? You trusted your wife. 6 months. They were doing it in my house for 6 months while I was at work. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. How do you get past something like this? You don't get past it. You get through it. What am I supposed to tell the kids? The truth, eventually. But first, you protect yourself. Get a lawyer, document everything, and don't let them gaslight you into thinking this is somehow your fault. I left him with copies of all the evidence and the contact information for the divorce attorney I'd hired. By evening, Jenna Morrison was served with papers, and Felix Danner had lost another client, permanently. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Wednesday brought a new development. Corey Walsh's husband Dave had apparently decided to handle things differently than Tom Morrison. Instead of filing for divorce, he'd confronted Felix directly at a job site, resulting in a very public argument that had ended with Felix calling the police. The irony was beautiful. Felix, who'd spent months sneaking around and destroying marriages, was now hiding behind the law when one of his victims wanted to confront him face to face. The police report made for interesting reading. Dave Walsh, described as a distraught husband, had allegedly threatened to ruin Felix's business and reputation. Felix, described as a local contractor, had claimed to fear for his safety. But the best part was the witness statements. 3 of Felix's workers had been present during the confrontation, and their accounts painted a very different picture than Felix's complaint. According to them, Dave had been angry but never threatening, while Felix had been arrogant and dismissive about the situation. He basically told the guy that his wife came on to him, one worker told the police. Said it wasn't his fault she was looking for excitement, real classy. By Thursday, Felix's reputation was in free fall. Word had spread through the contractor community about his behavior, and several suppliers were refusing to work with him. His insurance company was also asking questions about liability issues related to his unprofessional conduct with clients. But the coup de grace came Friday afternoon, when I received a call from an unexpected source. Mr. Briggs, this is Amanda Chen from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if you'd be interested in doing an interview about your situation. What kind of interview? We're doing a segment on infidelity and social media. Your video has gone viral, over 50,000 views and counting. We'd like to get your perspective on using public shaming as a response to adultery. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. When do you want to meet? The interview aired the following Tuesday during the evening news. I'd kept it classy. No names mentioned, no specific details, just a thoughtful discussion about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of our actions in the digital age. But the damage was done. Everyone in town knew exactly who I was talking about, and the story gave my situation a legitimacy that raw social media posts couldn't match. I wasn't just an angry husband anymore. I was a sympathetic figure standing up for betrayed spouses everywhere. The interview also included a brief segment with a local divorce attorney who explained how social media evidence could be used in custody and asset division cases. It was educational television at its finest. By the end of the week, Taryn had moved in with Felix, probably because she had nowhere else to go. Jenna was staying with her sister while Tom filed for divorce. Corey was in counseling with her husband, though I doubted that marriage would survive either. And Felix? Felix was learning that actions have consequences, and that some consequences last a lot longer than the pleasure that caused them. But I still had one more card to play. The biggest one of all. Because while everyone was focused on the adultery and the public shaming, I'd been quietly working on something much more devastating. Something that would ensure that Felix Danner never forgot the name Nolan Briggs. Something that would give me the last laugh in this whole sordid affair. The beauty of teaching high school is that you learn to think several moves ahead. Teenagers are natural chaos agents, and surviving in their environment requires the strategic mind of a chess master combined with the improvisational skills of a stand-up comedian. These skills, it turns out, translate remarkably well to psychological warfare. By the 3rd week of my very public divorce proceedings, I'd achieved something I never thought possible. I'd become popular. Not just at school, where my colleagues treated me like a conquering hero, but throughout the entire community. The wronged husband who'd fought back had struck a nerve with people who'd been betrayed, overlooked, or taken for granted. You're like a folk hero, Dave Baines said as we grabbed lunch in the faculty room. Linda says half the women in her book club want to nominate you for sainthood. The other half probably think I'm a vindictive psychopath. Yeah, but they're the ones cheating on their husbands, so their opinions don't count. The support was gratifying, but I wasn't ready to rest on my laurels. Felix, Taryn, and their enablers had spent months systematically destroying my marriage while treating it like entertainment. They'd earned everything that was coming to them. The next phase of my campaign began with a simple observation. Felix's business depended entirely on referrals and reputation. In a city our size, word of mouth could make or break a contractor. and Felix's mouth had been running in the wrong direction for too long. I started with the obvious targets, the wives he'd seduced and abandoned. My conversations with them had revealed a pattern of behavior that went back years. Felix would target married women going through rough patches, offer them attention and validation, and then disappear once the novelty wore off or things got too complicated. Sarah Mitchell had been his victim 2 years earlier, during her husband's deployment overseas. "He made me feel like I was the most beautiful woman in the world," she told me over coffee. "Right up until my husband came home and Felix stopped returning my calls." Lisa Brennan's story was similar, except her affair with Felix had cost her custody of her children when her ex-husband found out. "He promised me we'd be together," she said bitterly. Told me he was tired of meaningless relationships and wanted something real. 2 weeks later, he was already working on his next conquest. I compiled their stories into a detailed timeline of Felix's predatory behavior, complete with dates, locations, and corroborating evidence. Then I did something that would have made my students proud. I created a presentation. The venue was perfect, the monthly meeting of the Riverside Homeowners Association, where Felix had been trying to drum up business for the past 3 years. As a homeowner in the district, I had every right to address the group about matters affecting property values and community safety. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, standing at the podium in the community center, "I'm here tonight to discuss a threat to our neighborhood that's been operating under our noses for years." The audience of about 60 homeowners leaned forward with interest. These were people who took property values and community standards seriously. This threat targets our wives and daughters, exploits their vulnerabilities, and then abandons them when the consequences become inconvenient. This threat has a name: Felix Danner. I clicked to my first slide, a professional headshot of Felix that I'd pulled from his business website. "Mr. Danner has been using his position as a contractor to gain access to our homes and seduce our family members. Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly how he operates." What followed was 20 minutes of methodical destruction. I presented case studies of Felix's behavior, testimonials from his victims, and a detailed analysis of how his actions had affected property values in neighborhoods where his scandals had become public knowledge. The audience was riveted. Several women were taking notes. A few men looked like they wanted to hunt Felix down immediately. "The question before us tonight," I concluded, "is simple. Do we want this kind of predator operating in our community? Do we want to hire someone who views our homes as hunting grounds and our families as prey?" The vote was unanimous. The Riverside Homeowners Association would be recommending that all members avoid Felix Danner's services and warning other neighborhood groups about his behavior. But the real victory came afterward, when Margaret Applegate approached me with gleaming eyes. "Nolan, that was magnificent. Would you be willing to give the same presentation to the Ladies' Auxiliary next week?" Mrs. Applegate's Ladies' Auxiliary was the nerve center of the city's gossip network. Getting them on my side would be like having my own propaganda ministry. "I'd be honored," I said. Within a month, I'd given variations of my presentation to 6 different community groups. Felix's business dried up completely, and he was forced to take a job with a construction company in the next county over, assuming he could find one willing to hire him. But my masterpiece was yet to come. The inspiration struck during a particularly boring faculty meeting about standardized test preparation. Principal Halverson was droning on about data-driven instruction when I noticed something interesting. The meeting agenda included a section on community partnerships and guest speakers. Lincoln High had a robust program of bringing in local professionals to talk to students about career opportunities. We'd hosted everyone from doctors and lawyers to entrepreneurs and artists. The presentations were recorded for the school's website and often shared on social media as examples of our commitment to real-world education. I waited until after the meeting to approach Janet Halverson. "I have an idea for a guest speaker program," I said. "Something that would really resonate with our students." "What did you have in mind?" "A presentation on ethics in business, specifically how personal conduct affects professional reputation in the digital age." Janet raised an eyebrow. "That's very timely, given recent events." "I was thinking we could use local case studies, really drive home the consequences of poor decision-making." "Local case studies?" I smiled. I know just the person to illustrate what happens when someone's personal behavior destroys their professional credibility. The presentation was scheduled for the following Friday, during an all-school assembly. I'd convinced Janet that it would be more impactful if the students didn't know the specifics beforehand, just that they'd be hearing from a local business owner about the importance of reputation and integrity. Felix, desperate for any opportunity to rehabilitate his image, had jumped at the chance when I'd called him personally. "I think it's time we put this whole situation behind us," I'd told him. "Move forward like mature adults. This speaking opportunity could be a fresh start for you." He'd actually thanked me for the olive branch. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. The entire student body, nearly 800 kids, filed into the gymnasium for what they assumed would be another boring adult lecture about responsibility and making good choices. I introduced Felix with a perfectly straight face. Students, please welcome Mr. Felix Danner, a local contractor who's going to talk to you about how your personal choices can impact your professional life. Mr. Danner has some very personal experience with this topic. Felix took the podium confidently, probably thinking he was about to charm a room full of impressionable teenagers. He launched into a prepared speech about hard work, dedication, and building a reputation you could be proud of. That's when I started the slideshow. The first slide was innocuous: Felix's business logo and a photo of one of his renovation projects. But as he continued talking about integrity and trustworthiness, the slides began telling a different story. Screenshots of his dating profiles where he'd listed himself as single, photos from social media showing him with various women, including several who were clearly wearing wedding rings, text messages where he'd made the same promises to multiple women. The students started murmuring. Felix, focused on his speech, didn't notice at first, but when the murmur became a buzz, he glanced back at the screen. His face went white as he saw a photo of himself with Taryn, Jenna, and Corey at what was obviously an intimate dinner. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 months earlier. "What is this?" he demanded, turning to me. "Visual aids," I said calmly. I thought the students should see concrete examples of how personal conduct affects professional reputation. The next slide was a graph showing the decline in Felix's business over the past month, with specific data points corresponding to each public revelation about his behavior. As you can see, I continued, addressing the now captivated audience, Mr. Danner's personal choices have had measurable consequences for his professional life. His client base has decreased by approximately 80%, and his business partnership has been dissolved. Felix was frantically trying to shut down the projector, but I'd had the IT department lock the controls. The show would continue until I decided it was over. The lesson here, I said, is that in the digital age, there's no such thing as private behavior. Everything you do reflects on your character, and your character determines your opportunities. The final slide was a photo of Felix's truck with "cheater" keyed into the paint, damage that had appeared mysteriously the week before. Mr. Danner, would you like to share with the students how this situation has affected your business prospects? Felix was backing toward the exit, his face red with humiliation and rage. "You're insane," he snarled. "I'm educational," I corrected. "Students, please note how Mr. Danner is handling this situation. Rather than taking responsibility for his actions, he's attempting to blame others and avoid accountability. This is what we call a teachable moment." Felix stormed out of the gymnasium, but the damage was done. 800 teenagers had just watched a grown man get systematically destroyed by a chemistry teacher armed with PowerPoint and a complete lack of mercy. The video of the presentation was online within hours, shared by dozens of students who'd recorded it on their phones. By evening, it had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most of them celebrating my creative approach to public education. Principal Halverson called me into her office Monday morning, but she was trying not to smile. "That was either the most brilliant teaching moment I've ever witnessed or grounds for disciplinary action," she said. "Which way are you leaning?" "Well, the school board has received 17 calls from parents praising your innovative approach to character education. The superintendent wants to know if you'd be willing to present at the state education conference." "And Felix?" "Felix Danner is no longer welcome on school property. Something about making threats against faculty members." The best part was that I'd accomplished everything without breaking a single law or violating any professional ethics. I'd simply used the truth as a weapon, and the truth had proven devastatingly effective. But I still wasn't finished. Because while Felix was learning about consequences, Taryn was about to discover that her problems were just beginning. After all, I'd promised her the last laugh, and I always kept my promises. October brought the kind of weather that makes the Midwest briefly tolerable. Crisp mornings, brilliant afternoons, and the satisfying crunch of leaves underfoot. It also brought the final phase of my campaign against the people who'd thought they could destroy my life for their entertainment. Taryn had been living with Felix for 6 weeks, and the arrangement was clearly not going well. According to Mrs. Applegate's intelligence network, there had been several loud arguments at Felix's apartment, including one that had resulted in the police being called for a noise complaint. "She's been seen crying in the grocery store," Mrs. Applegate reported during one of our increasingly frequent coffee conversations. "Margaret Henderson said she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days." The reason for Taryn's distress became clear when I received a call from her divorce attorney. "Mr. Briggs, my client would like to discuss a settlement agreement." I'm listening. She's prepared to accept a 50-50 split of all marital assets, with no request for alimony. I almost laughed. That's very generous of her, considering she's the one who destroyed the marriage. She's also willing to accept responsibility for the affair in the divorce filing. What does she want in return? She'd like you to stop the public campaign against her and Mr. Danner. What public campaign? I've simply been sharing the truth about their behavior. There was a pause. Mr. Briggs, my client's career has been severely impacted by the publicity. She's been demoted at work and is having difficulty finding alternative employment. That's unfortunate. Perhaps she should have considered the potential consequences before she decided to cheat on her husband. She's also concerned about her safety. Mr. Danner has become increasingly volatile as his business has collapsed. Now that was interesting. Volatile how? He's been drinking heavily and making threats about getting revenge on the people who've ruined his life. By people, I assume he means me. Among others, my client is genuinely frightened. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Felix was cracking under pressure, and Taryn was finally experiencing some consequences for her choices, but I wasn't ready to let either of them off the hook. Tell your client that I'll consider a settlement once she's provided a full accounting of all the money she spent on her affair. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, gifts, everything. I want to know exactly how much of our joint assets she used to subsidize her betrayal. That seems unnecessarily punitive. That seems like basic financial transparency. She can provide the accounting, or we can let the judge decide how to divide assets between a faithful spouse and an adulterous one. The accounting, when it arrived 2 days later, was staggering. Over 6 months, Taryn had spent nearly $15,000 of our joint money on her affair. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, lingerie, gifts for Felix, and even a weekend trip to Chicago that she'd told me was a work conference. But the real revelation was in the details. The receipts painted a picture of a woman who'd been desperately trying to buy Felix's affection and attention. Expensive restaurants where she'd paid for meals for him and his friends. Hotel rooms that she'd charged to our credit card while Felix presumably paid for nothing. Gifts that included a $500 watch and a leather jacket that cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. She'd been subsidizing her own humiliation, and I had the documentation to prove it. I shared the accounting with my attorney, who whistled low when he saw the total. This changes things significantly, he said. We can argue that she dissipated marital assets for non-marital purposes. In this state, that's grounds for an unequal distribution in your favor. How unequal? Potentially very. You could end up with 70 or 80% of the marital assets, depending on the judge. But money wasn't my primary motivation anymore. I wanted something more valuable than assets. I wanted complete vindication. The opportunity came from an unexpected source, Felix himself. He showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, clearly drunk and spoiling for a fight. I watched him stumble up my driveway through the front window, noting the way he was weaving and the aggressive set of his shoulders. I opened the door before he could knock, my phone already recording. "Felix, what a pleasant surprise." "You snake," he slurred. "You've destroyed my life." "I've documented your behavior. There's a difference. I lost everything because of you. My business, my reputation, my income, everything. You lost everything because you chose to sleep with other men's wives. I just made sure people knew about it." He took a step closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Sitting in your little house playing your little games." "I think I'm a man who fought back when someone tried to destroy his marriage. What do you think you are, Felix?" "I'm a man who's got nothing left to lose." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." I held up my phone, making sure he could see that I was recording. "Please, continue. I'd love to have your threats on video." That seemed to penetrate his alcohol-soaked brain. He looked at the phone, then at me, then at Mrs. Applegate's house, where several lights had come on. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." He stumbled back to his truck and drove away, weaving slightly as he left my neighborhood. I immediately sent the video to my attorney and filed a police report about the threatening behavior. But Felix's visit had given me an idea for the perfect finale to this whole sordid drama. I called Taryn the next morning. "We need to talk," I said. "Nolan, thank God. I was hoping you'd—" "Not on the phone. Meet me at Rossini's tonight at 8. Come alone." "I don't think that's a good idea. Felix has been making threats. I know. All the more reason for us to handle this privately before he does something that gets him arrested." There was a long pause. "What do you want to talk about?" "The end of our marriage, the terms of our divorce, and what happens next. Are you willing to negotiate?" "I'm willing to listen. But Taryn? This is your last chance to handle this with some dignity. If you don't show up, or if you bring Felix, then we do this the hard way. I'll be there." Of course, I had no intention of negotiating anything, but I needed Taryn in a public place, on camera, for what I was about to do. I spent the day preparing my final presentation. This one would be different from the others, more personal, more devastating, and absolutely final. At 7:30, I was sitting in my car outside Rossini's, watching Taryn pace nervously in the parking lot. She looked terrible, thin, haggard, with the kind of desperate energy that comes from weeks of stress and poor decisions. At exactly 8 o'clock, I walked into the restaurant. She was waiting at a corner table, the same one where I'd first confronted her and her co-conspirators 6 weeks earlier. The irony was perfect. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Thank you for being punctual. It's the first time you've been honest about your schedule in months." She flinched but pressed on. "Nolan, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry anymore. Anger is what you feel in the moment. What I am is thorough." I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. "This contains the final accounting of our marriage. Every lie you told, every dollar you spent, every moment of humiliation you put me through, it also contains my final offer." "What kind of offer?" "You sign a confession admitting to adultery and financial misconduct. You agree to a dissolution that gives me 80% of our marital assets. You publicly apologize to me, to the people you involved in your deception, and to the community you've embarrassed with your behavior." Her face went white. "I can't do that. It would destroy any chance I have of rebuilding my life." "You destroyed your life when you decided to cheat on your husband. I'm just documenting the wreckage." "What if I refuse?" I smiled. "Then we go to trial, where all of this becomes public record. Every text message, every photo, every receipt. The local paper loves covering messy divorce trials, and I'm sure they'd be fascinated by the story of the insurance adjuster who spent $15,000 of her husband's money on her contractor boyfriend." She was crying now, but I felt no sympathy. These were the consequences she'd earned through months of deliberate deception. "There's something else," I said. "Felix made some threats against me yesterday. A drunk, angry threats about having nothing left to lose. I've reported them to the police, but I thought you should know that your boyfriend is becoming unstable." "He's not my boyfriend anymore," she whispered. "Oh?" "He threw me out 3 days ago, said I was too much trouble, that he never wanted anything serious anyway." She looked up at me with hollow eyes. "He used me, Nolan, just like he used all the others." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "What did you expect? You knew about his pattern of behavior. You knew he'd done the same thing to other women. Did you really think you were special?" I thought if I left you for him, he'd realize how serious I was, how much I was willing to sacrifice." "You sacrificed your marriage for a man who was never going to commit to you. You destroyed 15 years of trust for 6 months of feeling desired by someone who forgot about you the moment things got complicated." I stood up. "You have 24 hours to decide. Sign the agreement or face the consequences in court." As I walked away, I heard her call my name, but I didn't turn around. The time for conversation was over. But the time for the final act was just beginning, because Felix Danner had made one crucial mistake when he'd threatened me. He'd assumed I was the same passive, predictable man that Taryn had described in her journal entries. He was about to learn just how wrong that assumption was. The call came at 2:30 in the morning, jarring me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. The caller ID showed Taryn's number, but the voice on the other end was slurred and male. "You think you're so smart," Felix snarled into the phone. "Sitting in your house, ruining people's lives." I was instantly awake, adrenaline flooding my system. "Felix, how did you get Taryn's phone?" "She's right here. Want to talk to her?" There was a scuffling sound, then Taryn's voice, high and frightened. "Nolan, don't—" The line went silent. I immediately called 911, reporting a possible domestic disturbance and kidnapping. Then I called my attorney, waking him up to inform him that Felix had escalated from threats to potentially criminal behavior. "Don't do anything stupid," he warned. "Let the police handle this." But I wasn't planning to do anything stupid. I was planning to do something brilliant. I spent the next 3 hours setting up what would become the most satisfying moment of my life. By 6 a.m., I had cameras positioned around my house, a live stream ready to broadcast to my Facebook page, and a group text prepared to send to 50 of my closest contacts. Because I knew Felix. I'd studied him for months, analyzed his behavior patterns, and understood his psychology. He was a predator who'd never faced real consequences for his actions, a bully who'd always been able to intimidate or charm his way out of trouble, But now he was cornered, desperate, and drunk on anger and alcohol. He was going to come for me, probably bringing Taryn as some kind of twisted trophy or leverage. And I was going to be ready. The doorbell rang at 8:15 a.m. Through the peephole, I could see Felix standing on my porch, swaying slightly. Taryn was beside him, looking terrified and disheveled. I opened the door with my phone already recording. "Felix, Taryn. What a lovely surprise." "We need to talk," Felix said, pushing past me into my living room. "By all means, come in. Make yourselves comfortable." Taryn shot me a look that was equal parts apology and warning. Her makeup was smeared, and she had what looked like the beginning of a bruise on her left cheek. "Did he hit you?" I asked her directly. "It's not—" "Answer the question. Did Felix Danner hit you?" She nodded reluctantly. I turned to Felix, who was examining my living room like he was planning to redecorate it. "Domestic violence, kidnapping, and criminal threats. You're really going for the trifecta, aren't you?" "Shut up," he snarled. "You've destroyed everything I worked for." "I documented your behavior. There's a difference. My business is gone. My reputation is ruined. I can't even get a job with another contractor because of what you've done. What I've done is tell the truth about what kind of man you are." He took a step toward me, and I held up my phone. "Please, continue. I'm live streaming this to Facebook. We have about 30 viewers already." That stopped him cold. "Turn it off." "No. Turn it off, or I'll make you turn it off." There it is. Another threat, captured on video, witnessed by dozens of people. I addressed the camera directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Felix Danner, a local contractor who specializes in seducing married women and destroying families. As you can see, when confronted with the consequences of his actions, he resorts to threats and violence." Felix lunged at me, but I'd been expecting it. I sidestepped, and he crashed into my coffee table, sending books and magazines flying. "And there's the assault," I said calmly to the camera. "Witnessed by—" I glanced at my phone. 47 viewers and counting. Felix struggled to his feet, his face red with humiliation and rage. "You snake." "Taryn," I said, not taking my eyes off Felix. "There's a police station 3 blocks away. I suggest you start walking." "She's not going anywhere," Felix said. "Actually, she is, because holding someone against their will is called kidnapping, and it's a felony. Taryn, do you want to leave?" She nodded frantically. "Then leave. The door's right behind you." Felix moved to block her path, but I stepped between them. "Move aside, Felix." "Make me." I smiled. "I don't have to make you do anything. You're doing it all yourself, on camera, in front of witnesses. Every threat, every aggressive move, every moment of this pathetic display is being recorded and broadcast." The viewer count was up to 63 now, and the comments were pouring in. I could see people tagging the police department, sharing the stream, and providing real-time commentary on Felix's meltdown. "You want to know what's really pathetic?" I continued. "It's not that you seduced my wife. Plenty of men have affairs. It's not even that you made a business out of destroying marriages. Predators exist in every community." I took a step closer to him. "What's pathetic is that when you got caught, when you faced consequences for your actions, you couldn't handle it like a man. You threatened people, you became violent, and now you're having a breakdown in my living room while dozens of people watch you humiliate yourself." Felix swung at me, a wild, drunken punch that I easily avoided. He stumbled forward, off balance, and I grabbed his arm, using his momentum to send him crashing into my bookshelf. "Self-defense," I announced to the camera, witnessed by 71 viewers. That's when we heard the sirens. "And there's the cavalry," I said. "Right on schedule." The police had been monitoring the live stream. Apparently, several viewers had called 911 to report the domestic violence and threats. They burst through my front door just as Felix was trying to get back on his feet. "Nobody move," Officer Martinez shouted, his hand on his weapon. "Officer, I'm Nolan Briggs. I'm the one who called this in. That's Felix Danner, and he's been making threats and holding my ex-wife against her will." "Is anyone hurt?" "Taryn has been assaulted," I said, pointing to her bruised face. "Felix is drunk and has made multiple threats against me. Everything's been recorded and live-streamed." The next 20 minutes were a blur of police procedures, witness statements, and evidence collection. Felix was arrested for domestic violence, criminal threats, and unlawful restraint. Taryn was taken to the hospital to document her injuries and give a formal statement. But the most beautiful moment came when Officer Martinez asked me about the live stream. "You recorded everything?" "Every second, and it was broadcast live to over 100 viewers." "That's going to make our job a lot easier." The video of Felix's arrest went viral within hours. By evening, it had been viewed over 10,000 times and shared across multiple social media platforms. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with many people praising my calm handling of a dangerous situation. But the real vindication came 3 days later, when Taryn signed the divorce agreement I'd proposed. She agreed to accept 20% of our marital assets, admitted fault for the dissolution of our marriage, and provided a written apology that I was free to share publicly. Her statement was everything I could have hoped for. I want to publicly apologize to my husband, Nolan Briggs, for my inexcusable behavior during our marriage. I engaged in an extramarital affair, lied repeatedly about my activities, and spent thousands of dollars of our joint assets to support my deception. My actions were selfish, hurtful, and completely without justification. Nolan is a good man who deserved better than the betrayal I subjected him to. I take full responsibility for the destruction of our marriage and the pain I've caused to everyone involved. Felix, meanwhile, was facing serious criminal charges. The domestic violence charge alone carried a potential sentence of up to 2 years in prison, and his attorney was already discussing plea bargain options. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence was professional. The video of Felix's meltdown had been seen by thousands of people in our community and beyond. His behavior had been so erratic, so violent, and so publicly humiliating that any chance of rebuilding his reputation was gone forever. He'd become a cautionary tale, a living example of what happens when someone's personal conduct destroys their professional life. Construction companies wouldn't hire him, clients wouldn't trust him, and his name had become synonymous with unprofessional behavior and moral bankruptcy. The final chapter came 2 weeks later when I received a call from Principal Halverson. "Nolan, I have some interesting news. The State Education Department wants to use your situation as a case study in their new digital citizenship curriculum." "How so?" "They want to create a module about how social media can be used to document and respond to unethical behavior. Your approach, using truth, evidence, and public accountability rather than violence or illegal retaliation, is exactly the kind of model they want to promote." I thought about that for a moment. "So I'm going to be a teaching tool?" "You're going to be an example of how to fight back against people who try to destroy your life, using intelligence instead of emotion, evidence instead of violence." "And Felix?" "Felix is going to be an example of what happens when your personal conduct catches up with you in the digital age." That evening, I sat on my front porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Mrs. Applegate waved from her garden, and I waved back. Dave Baines drove by and honked his horn in greeting. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Mike. "Saw the news coverage. Mom says she's proud of you for standing up for yourself. Dad wants to know if you need help moving Felix's body." I laughed out loud, probably the first genuine laugh I'd had in months.